In southern Ontario, climatology points to peak severe weather season being in the summer months, with an emphasis on July through late August. This isn't written in stone, of course, as synoptic and mesoscale events that can trigger severe weather often happen in spring and can theoretically happen throughout the year as long as necessary conditions are met. The city of Hamilton, as an example, had a tornado hit as late as November 9th, 2005, which is far more likely to be the start of lake effect snow season than severe weather season. The most logical reason for these late season events occurring is due to higher temperatures lasting later into the year and available moisture on certain low-level southerly flow setups, allowing for more energy that storms can take advantage of, and the positioning of the polar jet stream beginning to return south from its northerly vacation, so to speak. These two factors, in tandem with shortwave troughs that traverse through this polar jet, open up severe weather opportunities into this area. As one specific yearly example, 2021 produced what seemed to be a continuous stream of shortwaves, producing severe weather events one after another. August 26th, September 7th, September 12th, and September 14th all featured notable severe weather events across southern Ontario. September 7th and September 14th both carried conditional tornado risks, with September 7th producing 10 total tornadoes, also classified as an outbreak, and September 12th produced an EF2 tornado near Park Hill after dark, and the rest of that elevated convection made its way east towards Hamilton well after dark into the night. And the remaining days that listed above all produced damaging wind events at least. Even October 8th threw in a brief shelf cloud for good measure. It was one of the more numerous late peak severe weather seasons I can remember for Ontario. Generally speaking, in terms of a severe weather risk, September 7th was scouted out at least 3 days in advance, so it would come to no surprise to those looking for it. The Storm Prediction Center, although never issuing outlooks for Canada, had issued a slight risk for both eastern Michigan and a 2% tornado risk from northern Michigan through to northern Illinois. It would be fair, with much of southern Ontario being downstream from the edge of these outlooks, and given the similar environment and storm motion which would be taking these storms into southern Ontario, that similar conditions can be extrapolated into southern Ontario, given this particular outlook. As of the early afternoon, the primary risk for the entire event really, was wind damage associated with a squall line that had formed in Michigan earlier in the day, and a secondary squall likely to form in the early afternoon. It was the result of a strong, front-loaded, upper-level trough that would move into southern Ontario in the afternoon, crossing over Lake Huron. The tornado risk was low both due to strong forcing from the trough, limiting discrete supercell chances, as storms would begin amalgamating quickly into a squall line in Michigan, and a lack of surface-based energy in the warm sector, southern Ontario in this case being the warm sector, until the early afternoon. Southern Ontario's storm intensity and tornado risk would be reliant on the timing and location of the warm front bringing warmer temperatures, better moisture, and surface-based energy into the area by the early afternoon, as storms would move into this environment later. Upper and mid-level support would be very strong, in some cases especially in the extreme upper levels, we're talking 300 millibars pushing over or close to 100 knots, and the forcing ahead of the trough would serve to both kick up strong thunderstorms and keep them organized as they moved east into southern Ontario. Despite the tornado risk presented as low, 2% for the US and extrapolated into Ontario being similar, the event ended up producing 10 tornadoes across southern Ontario on this day. So this begs the question, how did we end up with 10 confirmed tornadoes on a day when damaging wind and some hail was the most likely outcome from a synoptic meteorology standpoint? We'll discuss this after I show you how the entire day unfolded. It was quite clear once storms started firing in Michigan earlier in the day that the area of interest would be along Lake Huron, as so many Ontario events typically begin. The only question was where, because of the warm front position and whether or not we would see prefrontal discrete supercells fire in the warm sector for the increased tornado risk. However, once I saw how strong the incoming trough's forcing was basically instantaneously creating a squall line in Michigan at this point, effectively eliminating discrete storm risk, I started heading toward Amberley, Ontario along Road 86. I was not able to reach the shoreline in time to see the tornado over water because of both the time I left work and Road 86 west of Lucknow being closed down entirely. Once I saw the hook and couplet on radar west of Lucknow heading directly towards the town, I decided to observe from the notch position after driving north up Road 1 towards Holyrood, Ontario. This position was going to allow me a clear line of sight, well, as clear as a line of sight as I would get on this day, on what would produce a multi-vortex rain-wrapped EF2 tornado. It also became, quite apparent once reaching Lucknow that this storm was producing an incredible ground-scraping shelf cloud as I could see it in the distance.
Oh, what's that?
Is that a tornado?
I don't know.
It's circular motion.
Let's not do 7. We'll turn around.
Yeah.
As I waited on one of the side roads, both watching the couplet to my south and the shelf cloud coming in, I took pictures of the surroundings that I could find. Doing so was tough though, as the strong southerlies made keeping my balance difficult and trying to mitigate camera shake. The inflow to the storm complex at this point was very strong, so I knew it would continue to have optimum conditions for at least the next several hours, and that ended up proving to be correct. As the tornadic area of interest came closer to Lucknow, I approached it as close as I could as I dropped a little bit further south on Road 1 at this point to see if I could see the tornado inside or at least on the outskirts of the rain core. The squall line, which was now extending from Owen Sound all the way through London, was northeast to southwest oriented, so basically as long as I wasn't looking east, you could very clearly see it at this point in any direction you looked other than east. With the tornado moving nearly due east, the couplet I mean, this presented a logistics problem. Parts of Ontario have a gridded road network, but the problem is the roads run diagonal. A due east road route parallel to the circulation, the tornado was going almost due east at this point, without having a southeasterly component, which was going to put me in the rain-wrapped circulation, was not going to be possible. Knowing I wouldn't be able to outrun the squall line east either without having that southerly component, I doubled back north and let the squall, well away from the circulation at this point, just run me over. Usually I like trying to stay dry. It provides the best photo opportunities anyway. Inside this core had quarter-sized hail at peak and even left a couple of dents in the car. But the good news was I was able to avoid the entire circulation by doing so.
Run, horsey, run! Run, horsey, run!
After the storm had passed over, I went back to Lucknow to check on the area. I knew the tornado was likely to have passed close by the town, if not hit the town directly. I saw some tree damage, I saw cosmetic home damage, some power lines down on arrival, and a few of the residents were already out inspecting damage and checking on their neighbors. After confirming that the people that were out were okay and not seeing any major devastation that I'd have to check on, we did not encounter any injuries at this location, just to the south of the town. It was the best possible outcome. I did not hear of any injuries later on either, for at least this particular area. The squall line continued east, and the circulation tightened up once again, producing tornado damage near the area of Harriston and Kenilworth. It was moving so quickly that it was no longer going to be possible to catch up to this storm. So once I had made sure that the area was clear and the first responders were there, I began making my way back home just as the sun began to set. Earlier in the video, I mentioned discussing potential reasons as to why 10 tornadoes were produced on a day where maybe 1 to 2 would have been expected, and the primary risk was straight-line wind and hail damage. In my opinion, there are a few reasons as to why this outbreak occurred, which I want to discuss. The first was in the early afternoon over Lake Huron, an already ongoing squall line would be caught from behind by a faster moving, stronger squall line which was associated with the strong forcing of the upper level trough. Their collision point produced a favorable storm merger, and the southern end of the original squall line's merger area began producing tornadoes over Lake Huron waters before, of course, moving ashore. It was likely that this line merger triggered tornado genesis by acting similar to a rear flank downdraft surge in a discrete supercell. In short, it was a constructive merger for tornado genesis. You can have several mergers that are destructive, meaning no tornado genesis occurs, and they sometimes even interfere with each other, but this one was not the case. This hybrid quasi-linear convective system, also known as QLCS, this hybrid supercell embedded into the squall line ended up producing the EF2 tornado from Kingsbridge to Lucknow at first. It ended up producing a second tornado later on in its life cycle, which I'll explain as we get to point 2. Point 2 is that as the surface low, which was located by Lake Superior by 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, deepened, southerly to south-southeasterly surface winds running at an angle that wasn't quite parallel to the orientation of the northeast to southwest squall line would lead to elongated low-level hodographs and an increased QLCS tornado risk. In plain English, what that means is that storm relative winds blowing into the squall line or close to perpendicular to the squall line, as opposed to running parallel to it, would serve to increase the risk of couplets, which are smaller areas of rotation in the line, and therefore increase the tornado risk. This would also help explain why the hybrid supercell quasi-linear convective system maintained its strength and even re-strengthened after Lucknow, producing the hook echo on radar and the tornado damage in the Harriston-Kenilworth area further east of this region. And point 3, lastly, it is reasonable that the advantageous position of the warm front, which was surging north through southern Ontario at this time, may have helped provide an area of increased storm relative helicity to an already ongoing hybrid tornado producing supercell / quasi-linear convective system. It was kind of a hybrid. The tornado was ongoing right at the edge of the maximized warm front energy gradient and the leading edge of the maximized storm relative helicity zone as the warm front moved north and the supercell moved east almost directly on this gradient. If the original tornado formed through the offshore merger, which it almost certainly did, the combination of surface southerlies / south-southeasterlies and potentially maximized surface-based cape or energy and storm relative helicity gradient as it moved east along the warm front allowed it to maintain and even strengthen itself and recycle as it continued down the line going east. In conclusion, the drive home produced a very vivid cloud-to-cloud lightning while passing through the Kitchener-Waterloo region. Ultimately, I was stunned to learn that the entire day's events produced 10 total tornadoes, with most of these being produced closest to the Lake Huron shoreline after the squall line merger, but not exclusively tied here either. There were some produced further inland to the east, and even one confirmed several days later north of Markham as the complex continued further east. It wasn't a day that, while most people with a meteorology background would have expected by definition to produce a tornado outbreak, but it did. Synoptic setups can greatly overachieve with the help of mesoscale factors, and I think this was a pretty profound case study showing this to be the case. Until next time.